Hello everybody and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about how to DM for fighters. As I stated in my previous how to DM video, I was talking about how to DM for druids, and I am going to go through each class, and I wanted to go with fighter because one, in my first campaign that I ever ran, there was a fighter, which I ran for, but two, fighters can be a little bit interesting in the ways that they are supposed to act and how it is viewed by the other players and the DM. So I think giving some advice about that to beginner DMs of how to deal with them, what to expect from them, and how to move forward with some of the pitfalls that DMs will often run into with fighters can be really helpful. So let's jump into the video. Now, the first tip that I can give for fighters, and this may seem super obvious because it's in the name, but fighters fight. And the reason that I am putting this here is because when I was first playing as a DM, I watched the fighter, I watched the damage early levels that it did compared to the other players, and I was like, whoa, why is fighter so strong? Fighter can do a ton of damage, and even as the game goes on and other classes sort of catch up with their spells or their abilities, fighters consistently will just wreck your enemies if you let them. They're supposed to do that. Fighters are supposed to be that powerful. It is their whole thing. They are fighters. They're supposed to wreck shit. As Matthew Mercer once said,
fighters, man?
Yeah, bro.
They're really good at one thing, and that's fucking shit up.
I really hope that cursing, I don't usually curse in my videos. Hope that doesn't become a problem. It very much could become a problem. I'm gonna keep it, but fighters are good at wrecking shop. They're really super good at that. It's what they're meant to do. And as a DM, a lot of the times people will try and find ways to nerf fighters. Don't do this. Let fighters do what they do. Let them wreck shop, but understand that they're going to do that and prepare for it. The ways that you could do that is, one, if you are just seeing your fighter constantly blow through your combat encounters and make things less fun for your other players, what you should do is, one, add more enemies. Fighters are amazing at dealing damage to one enemy. They can deal damage to the big bad guy. That's usually what they'll go for. But if you add minions, add smaller creatures, add other things in the encounter for them to focus on, even if they're dealing something absurd like 40 damage per hit and they have 3 swings, it doesn't matter. If they deal 40 damage to a creature that only has 20 HP, it doesn't really mean much, does it? So what you want to do is you want to add more creatures and more targets for the fighter to attack if you want to keep your combat encounters interesting and not just being totally bulldozed over, because a lot of players really want challenge from combat. I personally love challenge from combat, and if I'm not getting that, that frustrates me a lot. So your fighter is going to deal a lot of damage. Anticipate that, add more enemies, or you actually can increase the HP pool of the monsters. All the monsters in the monster manual, quick little tip here, they all have the average HP. And what that means is you can look at it and you can see that at the monster stat card, there's going to be a little section that tells you how many hit points they have. And then next to that, there's going to be a section that says how many hit dice they have. Monsters have hit dice the same as players do, the same as player characters, sorry. And so if you go ahead and you take that and you just maximize how much HP they could have, not the average, that is perfectly okay. If your players are just really strong, you're giving them maybe too many magic items, they're really smart, but they want to be challenged by combat, go ahead and max out the HP. That's okay, but be careful with it because you might overtune. But to be honest with you, if you're having a problem with an overpowered fighter, overtuning really isn't much of an issue. And another problem that can come with this class is DMs will find ways of circumventing the fighter by preventing them from fighting. This can be done. I would really recommend holding it as a last resort. And what I mean by preventing them from fighting is they will be dominated. Somebody will cast Dominate Person on them. They will be prevented from getting to the bad guy. Maybe the bad guy's flying around and they only have a sword. Something to keep the fighter from fighting. If you do this, be super careful with it because that is just not fun. The fighter can do one thing, it can fight. If you are preventing them from doing the one thing that the class can do, as a player, that can be so disheartening. And if you're doing it every single combat, at that point, why are they even playing that character? So be careful when you do this. You can prevent them from fighting. Create a flying enemy, cast Dominate Monster on them, do something along those lines. There's no problems with that. But hold it sparingly for the bad guys that really mean something and you want to intimidate the players with. And on that same level, if you're going to create a combat encounter where the fighter can't fight, don't make it so they just can't fight. What you want to do is you want to create a circumstance that prevents them from doing what they're supposed to do. For example, I one time created a boss fight where the boss just kept teleporting around. The fighter could not get to him to swing her sword. It was so frustrating for her. And finally, at the end of the fight, one of them managed to keep him pinned down long enough for the fighter to get to him. She dealt 70-something points of damage in a single turn just wrecking shop on him. So if you're going to prevent a fighter from being able to attack somebody, go ahead. That's actually really fun, but make sure they have the moment where they finally get to do what they're supposed to do, what they want to do, and let them go. Just embrace it. If the enemy has a reaction that could protect them from it, maybe forgo doing that. That's okay. Let the fighter embrace what they can do, and that will feel even more rewarding to the fighter. And so that's one of the things that the fighter could do. It can fight, and that's one of the largest issues that come in front of it. The other thing that can really trip up a new DM is Action Surge. Action Surge does not create 2 new moves. What Action Surge does is it allows the player to take another action. The reason this is important is imagine you have a fighter who is dual wielding, and they have 2 scimitars, and they are swinging away, and they have the extra attack feature. So they swing twice with their scimitars, and then because they have 2 of them in their hands and they have the dual wielding fighting style, they are able to use a bonus action to attack again. If they Action Surge, they don't get 3 attacks again. They can only take an action, which means just those 2 extra attacks. Not a bonus action, not an extra movement, only the action. And that's super important because it prevents fighters becoming overpowered or way too much to handle. So don't forget that that's what Action Surge does. And then as you get into the higher levels for new DMs, it can be really disheartening to watch your fighter struggle because they really do fall off. The other classes tend to get a lot more at later levels, and the fighter gets another attack. And then at 20th level, the fighter gets another attack. While these players are getting super cool, powerful spells and wish and character abilities, fighter do get to attack 4 times. That seems really lame. I promise you it is not. There is nobody in the game who can deal as much consistent damage as the fighter. Anybody else can burst an enemy down, but fighter can always deal that damage consistently over and over. 4 attacks, even if they're missing 1 or 2 of them, they deal damage. And if you were to tally up in a single combat encounter how much everybody did, I guarantee you the fighter actually generally reigns supreme, if not equal with the rest of the players, even though they did not deal as much massive damage in 1 turn as you might expect. So ultimately, the fighter can do a lot of stuff, and I would let the fighter lean into that. Let them know that's what's going on. When a fighter attacks, I would describe how much damage they're doing, the impressiveness of what they're doing. Don't let the fighter just think, oh, I swung my sword and I'm done. That's no fun. And as a DM, you have the amazing ability to make that seem even more impressive. While they are fighting this massive dragon and everybody's casting magic and spells, there's one person crazy enough and strong enough to run up there with a blade and hit that massive creature. Don't let that go unappreciated. Experience that. Describe it. Make it seem important, because it is, and it is really fun to describe how your fighter fights, or ask the fighter to explain how they attack the creature and let them shine in those moments. So that's most of what I want to talk about on fighter. They are not that complicated. They really aren't. Honestly, fighter is one of my favorite classes. I don't know why, but the archetype of the idiot who's brave enough to run up to a monster and hit it with a stick while everybody else is slinging magic is just, it's so funny and evocative to me. So I hope all this advice was helpful and can help you guys out in what you're doing. I hope that your DMing goes well and that your games are going awesome. Please go out into the world. Don't let it get you down. Make it your own, and don't forget to play your role. Take care. Have a wonderful day.